Now, we're about 3 weeks into Black Ops Cold War's life cycle, and in that time, I'm sure that you've picked up quite a bit of things in terms of your gameplay that you're aware of. Maybe things like what flank routes work best for you, what weapons work best for you, and all things like that. But if you're like me, there's probably still a handful of things that you can probably pinpoint that just hurt your performance, things that you don't really like about your gameplay, and that's what I'll discuss here today. 10 common mistakes that you may be making and how to correct them. So as we go along, let me know down below in the comments, is there any area of focus in your gameplay that you're aware of and that you'd like to improve in within Black Ops Cold War? Let me know. But if you are new to the channel, do be sure to hit that subscribe button as we're on that road to 400,000 subscribers, and we'll keep you up to date with all things Black Ops Cold War, Warzone, and anything COD related, especially with Season 1 here rolling around the corner. We'll keep you up to date with anything you need to know. So if you're interested in joining the community, I'd love to have you. But that said, let's talk about these mistakes and how to fix them. So starting out with one of the things I think is a common mistake is players not finding their right FOV right off the bat. FOV is a huge thing here that has come to not only just PC as it has always been, but it's now there for console players as well within Black Ops Cold War. FOV being your field of view and how much you can actually see from your first person perspective. It gives visibility advantages in those peripherals and lets you see more of the playing field. Now, if you haven't adjusted your FOV, this is something that I definitely highly recommend, just because again, it gives you much more of that playing field and visibility. Now, if you decide to play around with your FOV, this is something that is entirely preference based. What's good for you isn't necessarily going to be good for me and vice versa. So I can't give you a solid definition of what I think the perfect FOV is, because you may greatly differ. I play on a 110 FOV, you may find a 95 to be perfect, or you may go all the way out and go to 120. One thing that I do highly recommend on top of this though, if you do adjust your FOV, is also finding the ADS field of view setting that works well for you, because this is something that if you play with that FOV, going a step further, I see so many people not adjusting this, and it could help your aim greatly, it could not, it could be placebo depending on who you are, but you have the two values of independent and affected. Independent snaps to a target and zooms in a little bit more to the same, if not similar value of what a standard default FOV ADS would be. So if you end up going to 110, 120, your zoom on that ADS is going to be much more than if it is scaled with the FOV, which is what affected does. Affected not zooming in as much because it takes into account that you see more of the playing field, so you have more peripheral vision and less zoom on that ADS. Now this again comes down to personal preference, because some will like that snap effect the zoom has if it's with independent, but others may like affected and that peripheral vision that it offers a little more. So just play around with those and see what feels natural to you if you haven't already. One big thing also that has been actually added post-launch is that of aim response curve type, and the next mistake is players not having this on the proper setting that is again the best feeling for you. There's default, linear, and dynamic. Personally, whenever this was introduced a couple of days after the launch of Black Ops Cold War, I went right to linear. When I first jumped on, whenever this was added, it was automatically on default, and I noticed right away this sort of sluggish feeling with my aim to what was actually translating to where the aim was in game. It felt like something was kind of holding me back, pushing against my aim a little bit, which aim assist is still a little bit buggy here within Black Ops Cold War, maybe putting that lightly, but it is something that it was directly affected to the fact that my aim rate wasn't actually directly correlated to the amount of pressure that I was putting on my stick. So for linear, this allows for a little bit more of a direct aim rate, meaning that you have greater control over the speed and pace at which you aim and move in with that right thumbstick. Dynamic offers just a little bit more, but I've found that linear for me is the sweet spot. So if you haven't really played with any of your controller settings or anything since launch, because it's just been kind of there, if you noticed a little bit of a difference a little bit after launch, that could be very well why. So definitely take a look at those and adjust those to how you feel accordingly. Next though, we're going to talk about some stuff that's actually in game, some things that come down to mental preparation, maybe shifting how you end up playing your gameplay itself. The next big one is players not having their gun up. This is something that there's no tack sprint penalty in this game. There is no difference between sprinting and then a super sprint, if you will. In Modern Warfare, tack sprint had a bigger sprint to fire differential as opposed to just if you were regularly sprinting. So there's no differentiation here within Black Ops Cold War, but that doesn't mean that getting caught sprinting is something you still want to do. You can run around, of course, for that better mobility and to be able to get to places faster, but at the same time, if you have an enemy posted up, they could very easily pick you off. You get 1 or 2 shots in before the enemy even gets their gun up, chances are you're going to win that gunfight. So for you as a player that may be dying around corners or entering engagements that may not be too favorable, have that gun up, strafe around a corner if you need to. And that kind of ties into the next couple of tips here that come down to just simply the thought process of how you play the game. Rushing headfirst into an engagement is a huge mistake, something that I am 100% guilty of, but to be able to survey the area, know what you're running into, is something that will allow you to play smarter, but also then allow you to stay alive longer as a result. Combine that with the fact that I know myself, I usually just run straight into a hard point or a domination hill, and oftentimes I'll just get picked off by somebody that's watching that sight line or that regular map flow, and I really just think to myself, man, I shouldn't have run in there like that. Rushing headfirst into an engagement can sometimes just be a death sentence, leading us then into the next mistake here is the pacing. Some players, myself included, want to have that high action gameplay, but sometimes it's just not possible. So slow down that pace a little bit. Take your game, slow it down, cool the jets a little bit, and it's something that I have definitely had trouble coming to terms with. I have always in past games loved to be that slayer who just goes in and kills everything in their path, but with skill-based matchmaking and the skill caliber of other players in every one of my games that can predict sight lines and rotations, it comes down to a game of mental play at that point. Not rushing into an area and then feeding these enemy streaks. Predict instead their movements, where they may be, those head glitches they may be in, pre-aim those, strafe around a corner, pop them, and then you're good to go in clearing out that area. Take that knowledge of where they may have just killed you at or where players often will be, predict those movements, those power positions, and dictate the play for yourself. Running in and feeding streaks helps no one but the enemy team. And finally, when it comes to sort of mental play within Black Ops Cold War, one big thing that I see so many people, especially when I end up playing solo myself, my team seems to never really look around here at this, but take a look at the minimap. A big mistake I find is players not utilizing that because maybe they're not used to after a year of not really playing with enemy fire showing up on that minimap. Now, Infinity Ward's design approach to not having fire show up on the minimap outside of Ground War was so that players don't just randomly chase dots. And that's one way to look at it, but when I look at a minimap like we have in Black Ops Cold War and in years previously, I utilize those live fire notifications to realize where players could be and where they may be flanking behind or something like that. It's one thing to take your team, see that cluster of players in an area and realize, okay, maybe they're flipping spawns to a different point behind us, maybe they're going to be coming from this route, but when you see those live fire marks, you can account for how many people are in that given location and then kind of whittle it down to knowing where you need to be conscious of in other areas of the map. So make sure that you're reading that minimap, make sure that you're utilizing that information, and if you're playing with a team, relaying it to as many people as possible. That comes down to something we'll talk about in a little bit with the streak selection. UAVs are absolutely such a helpful thing within this game. So if you have a team that can coordinate UAVs, definitely try to do that as well. Now, in terms of kitting yourself out, how it comes down to your gunplay, what works best for your class loadouts, one thing that I would definitely recommend, and I see players sometimes neglecting, is the right balance of attachments for movement speeds plus also damage. You want to make sure that you have that strafing speed covered, that ADS speed, that sprint to fire speed. Those are all things that I look for when building out a class. Now, of course, you can top heavy on one aspect and maybe not so much the others, but if you can find that balance where it's something that feels comfortable to you, but also covers the bases of maybe all those important key ingredients for how a weapon can play, that's even better. Another big mistake, though, when considering those builds for weapons is players don't often take into consideration bullet velocity as much as maybe they should. Bullet velocity in this game is huge for hit detection. It often can feel like your shots just aren't registering, which, yes, absolutely does happen. I do not want to demean the value that your shots definitely could be getting ghost bullets, because that is a huge connection issue that is plaguing Black Ops Cold War right now. But at the same time, if I'm not mistaken, every weapon within Black Ops Cold War is on a projectile physics system, meaning that it's not hit scan, that it's not just point, shoot, connect. There actually is bullet travel time, and leading sometimes is something that may need to be taken into account. So if you have something that is at its base the worst in terms of its bullet velocity, it's going to take much more time in terms of real-time gunfights and players moving around to actually connect, and therefore on your red dot you may be connecting with that enemy, but the time that it takes for that bullet to get there, they may not be where you were shooting at. So make sure that you're building out your class loadouts as well to maximize as much bullet velocity as possible. One other big thing that I would highly recommend, and I see a lot of people maybe not doing a ton, is utilizing your creative class and crafting it properly in terms of, say, wild cards, equipment, and all things like that. The one big thing that to me, I go on every single class unless I'm sniping, is perk greed. I don't really find a need for 8 attachments for the gunfighter wildcard. I don't really need danger close and that extra lethal. I don't really need that extra overkill unless I'm doing challenges or again sniping. So for the most part, perk greed is almost a default to me because I can take 6 perks, whereas opposed to my enemies, they may only have 3. So I can get that that added benefit of being the more super soldier, if you will, and that's something that is invaluable to me. It's one of the biggest parts I think that can help your gameplay, especially because you can add in things like paranoia, which shows you when a player is looking at you, giving you, again, more heads-up knowledge of how you can take an engagement. You can play those more objective game modes and play the objective itself by having things like tac mask and flak jacket on at the same time. There's just a lot of combinations that help your gameplay tremendously. So definitely craft those and keep that sort of stuff in mind. And the final tip I want to talk about today, and mistake that I see, is oftentimes streak selection. Some maps, firstly, are totally useless, so you want to make sure that you don't have certain streaks on certain maps. The big one that always comes to my mind are helicopters on Checkmate. You, of course, are playing in a giant warehouse that is enclosed, so while there are a lot of skylight windows, there's only so much that a chopper gunner can do if you end up getting that much skill in your game to begin with. And I'll be totally honest with you, one of the big ones that I've started using a ton, even though I hate when it happens to me, is air patrols. But at the same time, I'll play game modes a lot to rank up weapons like domination. And the way the streak system works, I can almost guarantee that in the second half, there's going to be a bombardment of streaks no matter how good or bad the enemy team is, which could completely turn the tide of the game. And that's just because they simply do not reset. Now, I'd be totally fine with the multiplier for streaks in your gun kills and maybe even your war machine and stuff like that. I'd be totally fine if that stays, but the fact that streaks do not reset, to me, that's just a big handout. That's a different story for a different day. Things like your air patrol, though, can absolutely stop things from getting out of hand in, say, domination. You can clear the skies with just the flick of a button. And you can even save yourself some streaks if you call in your air patrol quick enough when, say, an enemy has an air patrol, since you destroy an air patrol with an air patrol. But when it comes to your streaks, one big thing that I've found as of recently, looking back at my footage, is that there's definitely better ways that I could take advantage of streaks. A UAV, the air patrol, and maybe a war machine, that might be my new go-to, because you can't shoot down the war machine. The UAV you'll get quick enough, and it gives you that information that even if it is shot down, it does help out while you have it. And the air patrol is something that can, again, get you out of a sticky situation if you're being bombarded with streaks. So definitely consider how you play the game and weigh those pros and cons. But that's about where I'm at here with this. That's 10 things that I think are common mistakes within Black Ops Cold War. Again, some things mental, some things just preparation in terms of your class builds, and some things just coming down to how you approach situations in game. That's where we're gonna wrap it up. I would love to get your thoughts and feedback down there in the comment section down below. What do you guys think of this here? Do you think that maybe some of these mistakes are just impossible to overcome? Do you have anything you'd add to this list that's an easily correctable mistake? Whatever it is, let me know your thoughts. But hopefully enjoy the video, and hopefully this can help you out in some way, shape, or form. If you enjoyed the video, though, make sure you drop a like down below. If you are new to the channel, make sure you guys subscribe so you don't miss a single thing regarding all things Black Ops Cold War, Warzone, and anything COD related. We'll keep you up to date with all of it. So if you're interested, hit that subscribe button. If you guys also want to follow me over on Twitter and Instagram, those are the best places to get connected outside of YouTube. I live on both those. So if you guys want to strike up a conversation, ask me a question, whatever it may be, that link is down there in the description below. That said, thanks so much for watching. Mine has been Espresso. I'll see you guys later. Take care and peace.